Thank you for everyone who's joining us. So we're going to start right on the hour in 4 or 5 minutes. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Mickey from Empow. We are happy to share our perspective today in this webinar on how to use open source tools to hunt attackers using actor-performer sequences. We will begin with a short presentation and a demo by Idan Bellayev, and who will be followed by Michail Bletsas, Director of Computing at MIT Media Lab. At the end of the demo, we will hold a Q&A session, question and answer. So please send in any questions you have during the session via the webinar platform, and we will do our best to answer them. If we don't get to your question by the end of the session, we will get back to you via email. So I am happy to introduce Idan Bellayev. Idan served in the Israeli Defense Forces for almost 5 years. He gained experience as a Tier 1 and Tier 2 analyst and specialized in threat intelligence. Later on, he became team leader of the hunting team for his unit, and he then concluded his service by commanding the biggest SOC team in the IDF, in the Israeli Defense Forces. He's been with empow for 2.5 years as head of security research. Idan, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Mickey. So as Mickey said, my name is Idan, and today I'm going to talk to you about threat hunting using open source tools, and specifically about performance sequences. So we're going to talk about, first of all, a little bit about the settings, the lab environment that we created for the session. I'm going to walk you through all these different open source tools that we use to build this kind of environment, and tell you a little bit about how we're going to use it to perform the threat hunting. Next, I'm going to tell you about tactics and techniques. As presented in Michail attack threat model, we're going to use this abstraction in the process of making threat hunting a lot easier and a lot more practical. After that, I'm going to show you the actual demo that we created. In the demo, I'm going to show you how to do basic stuff that will help you make the threat hunting process easier. And I'm going to show you some cool stuff on how to find hard evidence in the different data sources that you use. And also a bit of pivoting just to how you can expand threat hunting and find interesting stuff in your log. The last part of my presentation would be to tell you about some advanced detection, just some ideas that you can take and use the methods and the tools that I'm going to show you and teach you about, and just do your own thing with. So this is the settings that we created for the session, and the core of our setting is the elastic stack, which was formerly called the ELK. And it's built from several layers. The first layer, the bottom one, is the log stash and the bits. And what the log stash does is basically just take logs from all your network. It can be logs from different type of sources in your network. It can be network traffic, it can be from security devices, it can be logs from operating systems. And it takes all these logs and use the log stash to parse it into one common schema. The bits is like a predefined parser that can be used very easily for different type of data. I'm going to use the winlog bits, which is a predefined parser for Windows event logs. After the data is being parsed, it's being collected and stored in the Elasticsearch, which is the second layer. The Elasticsearch is basically the database and the data lake that contains all the data that you collected. And there you can search the data. And the other layer, which is the Kibana, is used to create visualizations of all the data that you collected. And you can create some cool dashboards using all these visualizations. And I'm going to show you some examples during the demo. If you're not familiar with Kibana, this is an example of a basic screen in Kibana when you can see all the logs that you collected and just like a simple visualization of the logs on a timeline. And during the demo, I'm going to show you some ideas for visualization that we created. And it's very customizable, and you create all sorts of dashboards like this one. Next in our settings, the Windows events. Oh, and I wrote that the ELK, the Elasticsearch, is free. They do have some paid version, but we use the open source one, the free one, and it's practically fine for the need of the session. They have a lot of cool things that you can use in the free version. And on the Windows part, I wrote that it's sort of free, and because, well, Microsoft Windows is not free, but you probably already have Windows operating systems in your organization. So basically all you have to do is to know which events are interesting to you, and you can use the GPO, the Group Policy Orchestrator, to make sure you audit the right event IDs, the right event log types. And I'm going to tell you about different event types during the demo in my presentation, so you can take ideas on what events you want to log in your own organization. This is an example of event viewer on one of the hosts in our lab. And here you can see different event IDs that we managed to audit. You can see different type of events here. You can see events regarding authentication of users. It may be failed authentications or successful ones. You can see events regarding manipulation of accounts, like deleting a user or creating one, maybe changing permission, adding user to admin group and stuff like that. And you can see monitoring of files and directories, like create files, deleting directory, etc. This is a common tool for an analyst when he or she is investigating, and you can use it to see all the activity that's going on different hosts. You can collect this data from the domain controller directly, but you won't see everything that there is to see. So what we did was to use WEF, which is Windows Event Forwarder, to make sure we collect all the events from all the hosts in our domain. The next part will be the Snort. Snort is a free IDS, which is an intrusion detection system. And what it basically do is that it collects all the network traffic from your organization. It analyzes this traffic and use known patterns and basic anomalies just to detect malicious activity that is going through your network traffic. It can show you things like scans, denial of services, SQL injections, and anything that can be malicious. If you're not familiar with Snort, there are also free open source, and you can check the website and see all the different signatures and that they are able to detect. You have a textual description for each and every one of them, and they have quite a lot. The last part of our environment will be our own open source plugin. Our own plugin basically enrich all the logs that you collect from different devices and data sources in your network or domain. And what we do is what we call classification of the logs. We interpret, translate the logs and give you an abstract, like language of an attacker to determine which tactics or techniques are related to each one of those logs. And we do it using an AI technology which is called NLP, which stands for Natural Language Process. We are able to determine by the text or description of the log which tactic or technique is related to the specific log. And moreover than that, we also determine who is the victim and who is the performer on each of those logs. And this information is very crucial for us in the process of threat hunting. And I'll show you a bit how. But first of all, if you're not familiar with tactics and techniques, as presented in Michail's threat model attack, you should know that tactic is basically the why of an attacker. Why it does the certain step that he does during an attack campaign. An example for this kind of why can be a discovery. An attacker wants to find out things in your network, in your organization, just to make sure that he collects the right data or that he can move forward into his next objectives inside your network. An example for a technique of the how the user does what he does instead each one of those attack steps can be network service scanning. Some kind of port scan or port sweep. This can be a way of the attacker to achieve the objective of this specific step, which is discovery. So we have the tactic, which is the why, and the technique, which is the how. And I highlighted for you two different techniques on the screen. You can see the brute force and the network service scanning. And I would like you to keep in mind those two techniques because we'll see them again during the actual demo. Now, we in empow take this knowledge about tactics and techniques, this kind of abstraction, and use it in a way that we call cause and effect relations. Cause and effect is a meaningful sequence of two tactics or techniques. And I'll give you some examples to make sure you understand how it works. In the first example that you can see, there's a host A, which is the performer, and host B, which is the victim. And there are two steps of the attacker which make this kind of sequence. The first step comes from A to B, and also the second step comes from A to B. An example for that kind of sequence can be host A do some kind of vulnerability scan towards host B. And the second step will be to exploit its vulnerability. So we have a sequence of attack where the performer and the victim are identical in both steps. The second example is a bit different because I have the same performer here, but I have two different victims. A simple example for this kind of attack sequence can be an outbreak of a malware in a network. It can be an infection of one performer to two different victims. The last example is some kind of chain reaction. We have the first step where the A is the performer and B is the victim. And the following step, it turns out that B is the performer, and now host B is doing something malicious. So we have A the performer and B the victim in the first step. And in the second step, B becomes the performer of this particular attack step. And I'm telling you all of this because we're going to use this kind of abstraction and tactics and techniques and this model of cause and effect in our threat hunting in the demo. What empow basically does is making sure that it will be more easy for you to find the attacker through all the massive amount of data that you collect every day. And if I can give you a metaphor for it, it can be like finding a needle in a haystack, in a huge amount of haystacks. And what we does in empow is like dividing these haystacks into smaller packs and even help you maybe predict which haystack will most likely have the needle in it. So we kind of make it easier for you to go through the data and make it more effective for you to have a successful threat hunting. Now I'll move to the actual demo. The first screen that I want to show you is just the Kibana, where we can see all the different logs that we collected with the IDS, the intrusion detection system. You can see it's a really large amount of data. You can see the performer and the victim, which was enriched by empow, and you can see also the raw log that came from the vendor itself. The next screen that I want to show you is the dashboard where we can see all the events that we collected from Windows security events using the winlog bits. Here you can see all the different event IDs that were detected. You can see the different users that were detected in different events. And again, you can see the raw logs that came through winlog bits. In both cases, there's a lot of data on the screen, and it will be quite difficult to find anything interesting just by taking a look right here. So the main screen that we're going to use is the screen, this dashboard right here, and that was provided with the empow open source plugin. Here you can see the top tactics detected by empow, the top techniques. You can see the top performers, which are the host or entities that compromised your network. You can see the top victims, the hosts or entities that were compromised in your network. You can see a timeline of all the events and the raw data again. And so the first step that I'm going to do in this hunting is trying to find a meaningful sequence that makes sense to me and that can help me narrow down the data on the screen in order to find something that will be most likely a true positive. So I'm going to use the filter right here. And I'm going to just focus on two different tactics. The first one will be internal recon, and the second one will be lateral movement. So by doing this simple step, I already narrowed down everything that I see on the screen. It's a little bit more easy on the eye, but still not specific enough for me to start my hunting. So what I'm going to do is just focus on the top victim right here, narrow down the data even more. By doing that, I get a much clearer picture. I can see that I have a sequence of attack of two techniques. The first is brute force, and the second is some kind of network scan. I can see I have one performer, and I can see I have one victim. And if I use the timeline right here, I can narrow down the time frame to just see those two events. And by doing that, I can see even that I have here the first step, the network scan, and I can see the second step right here, which is the brute force. So I'm starting to get a sense of what is happening in this specific attack. And if I will take a look at the original logs with the original messages that came from Snort, I can see that the brute force one was actually talking about remote desktop protocol brute force. And so by seeing the word brute force, it's really easy to assume that we did classify correctly the signature into the brute force technique. And the other signature has a more long description, and you won't find the words port scan or network scan in the description, but you will find the word protocol sweep. So with empow technology, we knew how to take these words that weren't the port scan or network scan, but still managed to classify it correctly into the technique of network scanning. And so because I have this ability right here, I don't have to go through all the different signature IDs, and there are quite a lot. I can just focus on the abstract language of the attacker, which is the tactics and techniques, and that is relevant for this specific attack scenario. And if this is not enough proof that I have some kind of a true positive attack in my network, I can use the other data sources to give me more hard evidence of what is happening right now. So I will keep the time frame that I chose to focus on these two steps. And I will change the dashboard to the WinLogBit dashboard. And here we have a much more clear picture than what we saw the first time that we looked on the WinLogBit dashboard. And I can narrow down the time frame even more and get a very nice overview of the failed authentication attempts that were attempted by the attacker. We can see it by taking a look at the specific event ID of failed attempt authentications. We can see that there are quite a lot in a short amount of time, and we can also see the successful attempt at the end. We know that those authentication attempts were made on the administrator user, and so it's a pretty hard evidence that this was a true positive brute force by some kind of script or a machine doing on the administrator user. And it was actually a successful one because we see this kind of successful attempt at the end. And also we can see that the performer of these actions were the same performer that we saw in the snort alerts. So we do get a sense that this is not a false positive, and this is something that we should dig deeper into. And we managed to find it just in a few clicks in a pretty easy way to do. Now we don't have to stop here, and we can go back to the original dashboard. And we can play with what we have here and the different cause and effect relations in order to find more things that happened in this attack campaign. For example, I can focus my intentions right now on this performer right here and check another style of cause and effect relations. I can check if this performer was previously a victim to some kind of other attack. So I will use the filter to choose victim. And I write down the IP address of the current performer. So I didn't have any results, but you should keep in mind that we looked at a very narrow time frame. So I will try my luck and try to expand the time frame to be a little bigger. And so I discovered another evidence of the attack through the campaign. I can see that who was my performer in the previous step and is now a victim to another attack, which is in this case is a C2 activity of some sort. So it's starting to have me build the bigger picture of what the attacker was trying to do. I get the sense that I have some kind of a compromised host, and that was probably infected with some kind of malware, and then reacted and created a channel to some kind of server. And after that, the victim turned into the performer and did the scanning and the brute force and everything we saw when we started the hunting. So this was the demo that we made for you today. But I also want to show you some examples of more complicated and advanced detection that you can do on your own. I showed you just a simple brute force attack, but you can really take these events from the Windows security events or even the snort ones and try to find more complex things like pass the hash or some manipulation of admin users, like reset password for an admin or adding an as a user to an admin group, or even some kind of denial of service attack, like finding out if someone is trying to lock out lots of users in your domain. So it's really some ideas for you to take the tools and the different methods that I showed you and run with it, try different things. There are quite a lot of things that you can do, and you can really use a MITRE attack threat model to get some more ideas about things that you can discover on your own. So just for you to get some data sources on how to install Snort or the ELK stack on your own network, which was not a big deal at all. It's pretty simple and it's all free. You can check out our website and our open source in particular to download it and try it on your own. There are some guides there on how to install this whole environment. And you should really check MITRE as well, because there's some cool stuff that can trigger your imagination about the things that you can do on your own environment. So thank you for listening. And now I'll let Mickey tell you just a little bit about our company.
Great, thank you very much, Idan. So just a couple of words about empow. It's a cybersecurity company founded in Israel in 2014, headquartered in Boston. We have 16 patents, 6 issued, 10 pending in the arena of artificial intelligence and natural language processing. We're Gartner Cool Vendor in 2017. And we have many customers throughout North America and Europe. One of our customers, our partners, is MIT Media Lab, and I'm very happy that Michail Bletsas of MIT Media Lab is joining us today. A couple of words about Michail. He's been at MIT Media Lab for over 20 years, and he's responsible there for all the digital infrastructure that the lab uses to produce, store, and consume its bits. So I'm happy to give the stage over to Michail, and he'll share a few of his insights following the topic that we were discussing today.
Thanks, Mickey. First of all, standard disclaimer. Whatever I say today are my own views and not those of my employer. And they do not they shouldn't be taken as an endorsement on the part of my employer. MIT is a typical large university, and in that sense, it has a lot of exposure on the open internet. MIT was one of the last holdouts in the university space of a Class A network, Network 18. Because of that, we have always put our hosts directly on the internet. We don't use that many firewalls. We are a research environment. Our students have outwards facing servers. Just the Media Lab has over 500 of them. We don't like to control network traffic. We don't like to require permission from our users to publish things on the internet. And that creates a relatively attractive environment for hackers and other non-well-meaning people. I shouldn't use the term hackers because, you know, hacker at MIT used to mean a totally different thing. Anyway, we all know what we are talking about black hats and gray hats here. Because we are one of the very, very few places remaining that has so many open hosts on running on public IP addresses, we are attracting a lot of attention. If we could go to the next picture, please. This is a map of the countries which accessed or probed one of our honeypots. I will get to that a little bit later. One of our hosts that we use to produce security data in just the last week. So pretty much wherever there is good internet, people are probing our servers. Our approach to security is also quite different from a typical corporate approach, in the sense that we don't like to sniff all of our network traffic. We don't believe, first of all, we said we don't have perimeter defenses, strong perimeter defenses. We live in actual host-based defenses. And second, we don't have, and we don't, as a general practice, sniff and analyze traffic in the usual corporate manner. How do we generate logs then that we could use to analyze security or detect security events? First of all, we have a multitude of hosts that generate login, logout events, access events that we are concentrating on our ELK stack, on our Elastic Logstash and Kibana stack. We have an extensive installation. We also use a lot of honeypot servers. We use a lot of servers that appear and disappear in our network for the sole purpose of generating security logs. In that manner, for those hosts, since they don't have any sensitive or any personal data or something that would compromise the privacy of our users, we can actually apply all sorts of techniques, including snort and complete log dumps to our ELK stack. How this generates, obviously, a multitude of data, and we need a tool to analyze those, and that's where empow comes in. We started working with empow very early on. We like to believe that we had a little bit of influence in actually steering their product. Empow is one of these tools that allows us to find the needle in the haystack of log data. Idan's demo showed how you can create the filters that represent various events, various security events, and how you can actually have a sense of what's going on and actually detect attackers with a very high degree of probability, of certainty, sorry. We don't want to block people without having a very high degree of certainty that they are bad actors. We try to, when we detect serious attempts to breach the host security, normally we watch if the attacker succeeds, and so that we can patch our hosts or actually figure out what our vulnerabilities are. In certain sensitive cases, we were blocking that IP address in a variety of ways, either by a very crude router filter or by a more elaborate NSX firewall rule. In general, we think that tools like empow are the way to go as security data volume explodes. There is no way to do the analysis in there will be less and less opportunities to do manual analysis or use humans. You have to be able to have a sieve, a very nice sieve, very efficient sieve that will give you the events that you really have to look at. And we think that that empow's natural language processing capabilities allows it to do a good job in actually correlating events that are coming from different sources into one network event story. With that, I will stop and I will happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you very much, Michail. So we're opening we really appreciate you joining us today again. We're opening the question and answer session. We have a couple of questions that were sent in. So Idan or Michail, feel free to choose a question and share your thoughts.
So we got a question regarding whether the plugin need internet access to connect to the classification center. And the answer is yes, it does require this kind of connection. And a follow-up question was, how is the GDPR compliant for this plugin? So the answer is, we do need access to the internet, but we do not send private information, just an identifier of the information, but not the private information itself.
Thank you.
And there's another question I can answer that I see regarding when in the process we do this kind of classifying of event categories. And the answer is that we're doing it when the data is being parsed and being transferred to the Elasticsearch. We already give you the logs enriched with the category classification and the performer victim classification as well. Based on the using the NLP technology, like I told you about before, and the textual encryption that comes with it, you can learn more about it in our website and the link that we shared about the open source. I see another question regarding, is there a GitHub or anything similar to how to install it? So yes, we do. Everything, all the information that you need on how to install it is in the link that we shared, where you can find information about the product and specifically about the open source plugin. Another question here is the parsing done by empow plugin and how many vendors are supported. So currently, the open source is supporting several IDS vendors. Our full version of product supports much more. And obviously, you have the different bits that that are provided by Elastic that can give you quite a great coverage of parsing to different type of security or any other kind of service or devices.
Okay, I think we answered the questions. We will make this, unless anybody has anything to add, Michail or Idan, we will make this recording available on our website and send it to everyone who participated. So thank you very much for joining us today, and we look forward to speaking again soon. Thank you, Michail. Thank you, Idan. Have a great rest of the day.